Casey Gray here, and you are listening to another episode of the Conscious Builder Show, where I interview industry leaders and experts who share their tricks and tactics on how to build strong contracting businesses, healthy homes, and a powerful mindset. Today, I am speaking with Matt DiBara. As a fourth-generation Mason, Matt took over a very successful company and made it even more successful in the Los Angeles area. Matt used his degree in construction management and environmental design from UMass to earn a reputation for high-quality craftsmanship and impeccable service by bringing a fresh perspective to an old-school industry. In doing so, Matt discovered the answer to the biggest single challenge all contractors are now facing. And that challenge is recruiting. Matt is the recruiting master. During this conversation, he shares how improper recruiting almost bankrupted his company, what he did to flip this around, what the greatest marketing strategy is, and so much more. Enjoy this eye-opening conversation with Matt DiBara. Matt, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
I'd like to know a little bit more about you, what got you into the construction industry, what keeps you going, what was a catalyst for this, and because you have a lot on the go.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have much of a choice growing up. My family's been in construction for 4 generations, so 103 years that we can track, and then we think it goes longer than that. So both my great grandfathers came here from Italy, built homes from the ground up, and then they joke that they became contractors when they started working for people who spoke English. So outside the Italian section of a city outside of Boston, there, it's where we started. Great grandfather did it predominantly home building, and then they shifted more into masonry and concrete later. My grandfather said that was more his choice because he felt like it was more artistic. He enjoyed it. And then my father, uncle. And then I grew up, first day on the job, 9 years old, work boots, picking up trash, and then grew in the business from the bottom up ever since.
So is it something that you're genuinely interested in as well? Like, were you interested in as a kid, or did you kind of get like forced to it and you're like, sure, whatever, I'll go pick up garbage, go to the job site?
I loved it. I kind of had this weird curve because I loved it because my dad would show really cool photos of what he was building, and I got to meet my dad's friends, and he had some equipment at the house, and we would do projects on the weekends. And so I thought that was really cool. But my family was strict. They were like, look, you're going to learn this business, whether or not you like it. But then you can be a doctor, lawyer. I don't care what you do, but you need to learn what it means to work with your hands. And I just fell in love with it. I loved playing in the dirt. I loved building things. I went through, there was a few years there, my younger years, as a little kid, where I was like, I just want to go play. But, so that was tough, but I really fell in love with it, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
So now, are you still kind of involved? Is that still a family business, what you're doing right now, or is that your own business on the construction side? So the DiBara Masonry.
It's my company now. I run it completely, pretty hands off. I do a little bit of the sales here and there, like certain special projects. Like we just got called out to look at this really interesting cemetery project. So we're preserving all the tombs and graves. It's one of the oldest cemeteries in California. So like there's certain projects like that I'll get involved in, but kind of selfishly because I enjoy it. So I was like, yeah, I'll take this one. Pretty hands off. I got a great team. I'm very fortunate in that regard.
Amazing. So we'll talk a little bit about the construction side. Then I want to get into your other business that helps other contractors as well. What are some of the challenges you're facing now? I already alluded to, you're getting a lot of rain in LA right now. So things are happening that haven't happened ever, maybe, from what I understand, right? With the retaining walls and not being able to handle the hydrostatic pressure. So that's obviously good for business in the sense that you get a lot of calls, not necessarily great for homeowners, as you were mentioning, because it might not be covered under insurance, but that usually comes with some other problems as well. So do you have any challenges on that front, or are there other business challenges that you're dealing with right now?
The hiring, which I'm sure we'll get into later, was the biggest one. I struggled to hire. It almost bankrupted the company. So that was pretty bad in 2018. I ignored that. That was a 3-year journey. So that was pretty tough. the hiring side. We ended up figuring it out, obviously, but the hiring was big. And then one of the other things now is looking at modernizing the company is a big one for me, and that's always a challenge because I find it's when you're doing this right, it should be difficult because on one end you have shiny object syndrome, which means every new thing that comes into the construction space, if you jump on that, then you're not sticking to some of the things. Like we have a limited amount of bandwidth, and at the same time, I sat with my dad at 9 years old when the only marketing decision he made was the yellow pages. We'd meet with somebody, every 6 months, and it would be like, Mr. DiBara, you want a full page or a half page ad? Business is slow, maybe get a full, like that was it. And so it's this balance for me. What I think is the biggest struggle for us is the balance between how do you innovate and how do you make sure that you're focusing on that type of innovation, but at the same time, how do you ensure that you're not just having shiny object syndrome, or that you're picking something up and dropping something else. So, I specifically found this out on the hiring side. When we built the system, we found out that what worked was not all modern technology or techniques and technology, or all old school, like the stuff my grandfather or great grandfather did. It was actually doing both. And so that balance is I think if you're doing it right, should be difficult.
So that balance, what are you doing? Like, how do you know if you're doing it right? Because if it's difficult, because I like to have a belief, and this is something I've been working on, is that, or you ask a question, what would this look like if it were easy, right? Because I feel like, I think I guess it depends on how you define difficult is what I'm getting to, because there can be it doesn't need to be, it can be hard to do, but simple. You know what I mean? So maybe simple is the right way.
Better
easy,
word.
sort of
I mean, I'm a big believer in plan your work your plan. And so that's what I mean. I mean, it's the intellectual ability to think through and decipher, okay, is this something we should do? Should we do it now? What resources will this take? What's the upside? What's the potential downside? Do we stop doing that? That's the kind of strategic thinking. When I say difficult, I'm simplifying, but I like your definition much better. That ability to strategically think in business and not just do so much. I spend a lot more time now when I'm managing the company just thinking, strategically thinking. And I'll spend 59 minutes thinking about something and a minute making a decision and say, okay, this is the plan. This is what we're doing. This is how it'll get executed, with my team. And I think that's the skill set that is, it's the reason I said difficult is because it's so counterintuitive, because what you typically grows a business is the doing, right? You start a company and you're doing everything. And it's like, I got to do this. I got to do that. It's all about output because you're the bottleneck and you're limited, typically financially and otherwise. So, and then when you grow the company, you shift into a place where strategic thinking, it's the opposite of doing now. It's looking at data, it's analyzing patterns and trends, it's being able to understand resources, upside, downside, risk. And so I think for many contractors out there, that's the difficult part. And that's what I mean. Like if you're making decisions and it's simple and it's just really, really the first glance at a decision, usually my gut decision, quick one, versus when I set aside time and think, are not usually the same decision, almost always.
Do you have any examples that you could share where you maybe made a quick decision and then after you realized, you know what, if I would have thought about this more? So it's like that 2020 hindsight.
Right? Yeah. I mean, we've done it with projects. So we've done it with certain relationships and projects is a good example. So, project comes in, salesperson, hey, I got this referral. It's this type of work. It's X amount of dollars. It's X amount of margin. Great. Let's do it. And then I do a thing where I schedule thinking time. So I actually literally sit down and I think, and I do this for an hour to 2 hours. And I just ask myself, and I play games. And what I do is I say, okay, if I were going to put me out of business, how would I do it? And that's a mental exercise that I do. I'm like, if I were going to start a company right now to compete against me, how would I do that? What are my, and then that shows me my weaknesses. So to come back to the example of that project, it was a specialty product. And I thought to myself, well, what could be the worst thing that happens? And I started to think through that. And I was like, well, you have this issue with materials. Okay, let me look at, I only have 2 crews that can do this. Let me look at the schedule and make sure they have availability. Oh, wait a minute. They're scheduled out on these other 3 projects. This would be really difficult to schedule. It would almost have to, it's like threading a needle. It would have to fit in this 2-month time span. And if either project starts early or is delayed, it won't work. So that's an example of where it's like that quick decision of, well, obviously revenue and great profit margin, right? But that's a theory, right? My sales member showed me on paper what we should make, but that's a theory. It's not real. So running through that exercise, I was like, actually, the risks relative to all the work that we're closing that my team knows how to do, that we have. So I thought through a plan on how I could manage that relationship. I actually found a contractor that could do that type of work, partnered with them on the project, managed the introduction, and made sure that they didn't take the relationship, because that was what I was worried about. I was worried about them coming in, doing the work, and then taking the millions of dollars worth of work we were already doing for this client. And so because I controlled it, I had no downside risk, solved the problem, didn't stress the team. And that's just one example of like let's do this. Wait, let me think about it.
Right. Yeah. So you kind of said yes and figure out later. That's another mentor of mine. One of the things or a group that I'm in, Mastermind, one of their mantras is say yes and figure out later, which can get you into trouble. But at the same time, it kind of forces you to step your game up as well, right? If you're not willing to take that risk and actually say yes to something you're not 100% sure about. So all sorts of different ways to think about it too. So the way you're thinking is obviously going back to the modernization of the business. Is that what you mean by it, right? You had mentioned that you want to modernize the business. So are you just trying to make sure that you're incorporating all of these different strategies and technology into your business without causing more problems?
Well, I look at a couple things, right? I look at friction. I look at where is there friction in the business. I look at capacity. So I look at the skill level of the person or the role in my company. And then I look at it on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, all the tasks that they're doing, and analyze that. And so we created, for example, this was pre-COVID. We had a virtual estimating process that we created well before things went virtual with COVID. And the reason for that was because we found that so many clients didn't know how to properly define terms in masonry and concrete. So a lot of homeowners were like, I have a brick wall, but it was actually concrete block, or I have a concrete wall, but it was actually brick, or, I want to repair, but then they want to rebuild it. And they didn't know the codes. And so we came up with this thing called the virtual consultation. And it allowed us to have one person do 4 calls an hour. So 15-minute calls versus driving all around the city. So the capacity went from roughly 6 in-person appointments that weren't super qualified, that we had somewhat of an idea of the project, but not a ton, to talking to 32 homeowners a day from the office and being able to give ballpark pricing, explain who we are as a company. And that's one example where I looked at, and that's a modernization, and that grew the business exponentially because we were able to hire still extremely technical consultants. We don't have a sales model, so we don't go out and sell things. We're actually paid to give estimates. And the reason for that is so that my consultants paid their time so they can give knowledge. So they can be like, hey, here's the 3 ways I would do this. Let us know what you think. We're happy to price this. But that's one example of the modernization. And so I'm looking for those things in the business as I continue to grow.
Right. So you're charging for estimates, so to speak. So that initial consultation, but then you also take on the work as well, if they want you to. Correct.
Well, we do it free over the phone. So we're like, okay, something free, no problem. Send us photos and we'll do it free. But if you want us to come out, we're happy to do that, but we're going to compensate our team's time so that they're not in a situation where they have to high pressure sell. Like they're compensated whether they sell you a $100,000 project or whether they sell you nothing. And they just give a bunch of knowledge and genuine feedback and then they leave. And so that model has served us really well because I have an exercise that I do where I call it the Venn diagram exercise, but basically I draw a Venn diagram. So 2 circles and overlap in the middle. And what I do is I put on 2 hats. One hat is my selfish hat. So with the sales side of things, I put on my hat and I said, okay, for DiBara Masonry, what are the selfish things that I want? Right. Then I went to the customer side and I put on their hat. And I said, I'm a homeowner. What are the things that I want? I want quick. I want easy. I'm sick. I don't want you coming out if you don't know the right project. If you're 3 times what I can afford, I don't want that. And I did that exercise and I drew lines where there was overlap and I could find, okay, I could give you this and this benefits me. And that's how we built the virtual consultation entire business model.